Most consider Michigan a college football playoff contender this season, but who will lead them there? Mark Rogers TV talking Michigan football with Anthony Broome from Maize and Blue. Anthony, it's always a good time breaking down some personnel. You've got a lot of expectations for this football team, not you personally, but the nation pretty much.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting year. I mean, last year, I think, can't really say Michigan was under the radar because they had just hired Jim Harbaugh and, there was a lot of excitement around the program. But now that was a team that didn't have expectations. Last year was supposed to be a rebuilding year. This year, things went a little bit better than people thought they would in year one for Jim Harbaugh. And all those guys are coming back. So a lot of people think that they're a college football playoff contender. They're definitely a conference title contender. And it's amazing what a difference a year makes.
John O'Korn, 2 seasons at Houston as the starting quarterback. He had one pretty prolific season with about 3,000 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. He's a bit of a gunslinger, which to me wouldn't seem to match what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. But if he can kind of rein that in and take care of the football, he might be the guy.
Yeah, John O'Korn to me is, I don't want to say a boom or bust quarterback because I think if he starts, he can be good as is, but I think he's the guy with the most upside at quarterback right now, or at least that will factor into the rotation this year. He does have a bigger arm. Like you said, he is a little bit of a gunslinger, a little bit more mobile than some people might give him credit for. And, he had a little bit of an up and down spring, a good showing in the spring game, but, hasn't really pulled away in the race like a lot of people thought he would. And a lot of people said, if he had been eligible last year, that he may have started over Jake Rudock. So, there's high praise there. Like you said, I think if they're able to rein him in, if they're able to get him to work in this system, which I think if he's the guy, I think they'll be able to do that. There might be a little bit more risk there starting him, but the reward is probably higher than anyone else on the quarterback rotation right now.
Yeah, it's especially high praise considering that Rudock stepped in and turned out to be more than a workman-like quarterback, which was expected based on his track record at Iowa. The running game was prominent early in the season, but he shouldered the load for a number of those games. Indiana, that game comes to mind in particular, and really had to shoulder the load and really aired it out and came up with some prolific games in the passing game. Wilton Speight, big 6'7" kid, not necessarily the guy that's going to throw it around the lot and show you the NFL arm to the extent of O'Korn, but may take care of the football a little bit better. Thrown into action in a very difficult game at Minnesota last season, he responded with some big completions to win the game.
Yeah, he's a guy where I think the step from the end of last season up until now, or at least through spring football, has been pretty good for him. I actually think coming out of the spring game, if there was a game that next week, say if we were in the fall already, I think he may have been your starter. I think it speaks a lot to just how poised he is. He's not a guy that gets rattled. He's a good leader. Doesn't have the big arm like O'Korn does, but he's a smart passer. He can make the check down throws. He can actually make some plays with his legs too. So that's a guy where I think O'Korn and Speight are the two guys to battle it out for the job. Again, it really just becomes a matter of the risk reward guy in O'Korn or the game manager in Speight. And I think he has the ability to be more than just a guy that gets you through games, that doesn't lose you games. But whoever it is, and Jim Harbaugh has really kind of earned the benefit of the doubt when it comes to choosing quarterbacks over the years. Whoever does end up being that guy, I think Michigan will have a pretty good, pretty solid to good starting quarterback that won't make mistakes, that won't lose them games, and maybe even will win them some games like Jake Rudock did.
Anthony, as you well know, it almost seems like forever ago now. Devin Gardner got hurt against Ohio State at the conclusion of 2013 when he almost pulled off the upset in Ann Arbor. Shane Morris got the call in the bowl game against Kansas State, and I remember watching that game gun to gun. It wasn't pretty for the Wolverines overall, but I thought Shane Morris, for being a first-time starter as a freshman on a bowl game stage, acquitted himself pretty well. And I thought, this is the guy. Like a lot of people, I thought, this is the future of Michigan football. And no, he didn't throw for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. The stats were pretty marginal, but it seemed like he was sure of himself. He set up in the pocket, delivered the football where he needed to, and it future at that point, and it's just not happened for him.
No, I think at this point, Shane Morris pretty much is what he is. He's a former, blue chip recruit, big arm. He might have the best arm out of any of the quarterbacks on the roster, but just hasn't been able to put it together. His mechanics are sloppy. He's not very accurate. So it is disappointing. I think when pressed into action as maybe a backup guy or in some mop-up duty, that's kind of what his role is. But again, whoever loses the starting quarterback job will be the number 2 quarterback. And maybe it helped that he had a redshirt season last year. Maybe we'll see if he sticks through Michigan. He has 2 years of eligibility remaining now. It's disappointing to say the least, but he's still a good guy in that locker room. A lot of guys look up to him. Still works very hard, very valuable player to them. Just hasn't really been able to put it together on the field, and it's disappointing. But that just goes to show, recruiting rankings aren't always the gospel will be coming out of high school. So it's disappointing, and who knows, maybe he has a great fall camp and pushes someone to be the number 2. At this point, I don't see him really putting a dent into the starting quarterback battle, though.
Anthony, it's hard to believe these guys are going to be on the field in just a few weeks. So as we head toward August camp, can you kind of lay out the odds for us as you see it between O'Korn and Speight?
I think if I had to put a percentage on it today, like I said, coming out of spring, it may have been Speight, but if I had to put a percentage on it, I think it might be 55-45 in favor of John O'Korn right now. I know both guys have been putting a lot of work in the offseason, off the field, running, doing the routes with teammates and working out on their own time. I just think at the end of the day, he's a little more athletic, brings a little bit more to the table. And Michigan has a schedule to where, there's really not a huge tough test until, almost halfway through the season when they play Michigan State. They'll play the first 5 games of the year at home. Penn State and Wisconsin are probably the toughest of those 2 games that they'll play, and who knows what they'll be, but you would think those are 2 games that Michigan would be able to handle pretty easily, especially if they're a college football playoff contender. You'd hope they would handle them easily, but I think they have a lot of time to figure it out, a lot of time to ease a guy in, and if it is John O'Korn week 1, it could be maybe it's still him by week 5 and he's taking a step forward. Maybe he's not quite what they're looking for, and they play quarterback roulette a little bit. We'll see what happens. But they have a lot of time to figure it out, and the track record would suggest that they'll do so.
We love breaking down the Big Ten personnel. We stop at Michigan at quarterback, where they haven't decided on who's number 1, but this team is decidedly, based on media pundits, a contender, not just for the Big Ten, but maybe beyond. Anthony Broome from Maize and Blue helping us out at quarterback for the Maize and Blue. Appreciate it, Anthony.
Of course, anytime.